welcome to The Debate. Today we're diving into a really fascinating question about how visual media impacts us, especially when we talk about therapy and healing. We all kind of know visuals are powerful, but just how deep does that power go? Specifically, our central question is this. Does the precise control over photographic and video elements, things like camera angles, how we light a scene, shot distances, even just using a mobile phone, does that offer direct, inherent therapeutic benefits? Or are these technical choices more, let's say, instrumental, primarily serving the larger narrative and the reflective process that happens in video therapy?
Right.
And this whole discussion, it really emerges directly from source material that examines video therapy as a tool for individuals, including those coping with serious illnesses like cancer, helping them process experiences and gain self-awareness. So I'll be arguing for the direct therapeutic power of these technical elements.
And I'll be taking the position that while they're crucial, absolutely crucial, they primarily function as aids to the broader therapeutic process. It's a subtle distinction, but I think an important one for how we understand this. My view is that while yes, things like camera angles, lighting, shot distances are significant in video therapy, their main therapeutic power is, instrumental, not inherent or direct. These technical bits are vital, no doubt, for enabling the whole process. Building the story, editing it, that key act of self-observation. But for me, the core therapeutic engine lies in the patient actually engaging with creating and reflecting on their personal story. It's about the psychological stuff, externalization, reframing. Technical choices, they enhance the story. They help communication, absolutely. But the deep psychological shift, that comes from the overall process of self-expression and developing awareness by watching yourself, watching your story unfold. And mobile phones, their accessibility is fantastic for getting more people involved. It democratizes the medium. But I don't think it's about the inherent technical depth of the phone's functions driving the healing.
Okay, I hear your point about the broader narrative, the story. But I push back a bit on the idea that the technical choices themselves aren't directly therapeutic. My stance is that this precise control over photographic elements, the angles, the light, the distance, even with a simple phone, offers benefits that are inherent and direct. These aren't just, aesthetic choices. They're active players in shaping and visualizing an individual's internal emotional world. By actively making these specific visual choices, patients get empowered. They make their feelings concrete, understandable. They gain real, tangible control over how their story is seen and felt. And that process in itself directly fuels self-awareness and healing. The specific visual language they craft through these deliberate technical moves becomes a direct therapeutic intervention. It mirrors and helps process really deep-seated emotion. It's about the patient's agency in visually defining their reality. And, that act alone is powerful.
Agency is definitely part of it. I won't argue that. But I'm still not quite convinced the direct mechanism of healing is located within the technical parameters themselves. I mean, if you look at the source material, it seems to consistently point towards the broader therapeutic process, doesn't it? For example, it mentions that in editing, patients take ownership of their story by the possibility of choosing the way the story will be presented. That's page 17.
Right.
Now that phrasing emphasizes narrative agency, right? Choosing what to tell, how to sequence it. It feels more about the story construction than, say, mastering a specific lighting technique. And participant A noted on page 16 that the process of script writing, filming, and editing brought a lot of self-criticism. You see yourself and understand things differently. I had to tell my story through video. That sounds very much like the holistic process. The telling, the reflecting on the story is the source of insight and change, not necessarily the intrinsic therapeutic value of choosing, a low-angle shot versus a high-angle one in isolation.
Okay, but let's dig into that direct emotional impact of the visual framing itself. Think about how, a filmmaker uses a jarring cut or maybe a slow zoom to make you feel something specific instantly. The precise way visual framing techniques are applied directly impacts our emotional processing. Sometimes, I'd argue, even before we fully understand the whole story. Our source material, for instance, notes how extreme close-up shots can be frightening, That's on page 7. Now, this isn't just about interpreting a story point. It's about how a specific camera distance can inherently provoke a strong, almost gut-level emotional response. And similarly, the ability mentioned, again on page 7, to choose the best angles for each emotion and stage in the story during editing, that's about more than just clear communication, isn't it? It feels like it's about directly evoking, shaping, and even validating the emotional experience itself. Look at participant D on page 15, who said, "Just watching it was interesting. It brought up more than I initially intended. It was born from feelings and emotions I had, and the viewing added a few more things. It was very strong and powerful." That speaks volumes, I think, about the direct emotional weight of the visual representation, which is carefully put together through specific camera work, specific angles and distances, even if it's just on a phone screen. Don't you think that immediate visceral connection is, in itself, a therapeutic act?
I do see the power of the visual, absolutely. But I'm not quite sold that the technical act of framing, the choice of the close-up itself, is the direct therapeutic agent. While, okay, visual framing undeniably shapes how a story is perceived, its therapeutic value, I'd argue, still primarily lies in supporting the interpretation and reflection on the overall narrative. That extreme close-up you mentioned, its impact is surely filtered through the creators and the viewers' understanding of what it represents within their specific story. Is the fear genuinely from the close-up technique, or is it because the close-up is of their own face, perhaps showing distress at a particularly vulnerable moment within their personal narrative?
Interesting distinction.
Yeah, and the source material seems to back this up, emphasizing that the video offers an opportunity, which includes the patient's viewing of himself, and in the process of self-observation, he develops awareness, that's page 3. This really highlights the act of observing and the developing awareness of oneself as represented. The technical elements, the angles, the lighting, the distance, they are sophisticated, crucial tools to present that self effectively. But the healing, that seems to come from the cognitive and emotional processing of what's being shown, not from the technical choice in a vacuum. Participant B, for example, on page 15, explained how the video showed me how I behave differently. The focus there is self-reflection on behavior, the outcome, not the specific lens or angle used to capture it.
Okay, but let's take that example. If an extreme close-up can evoke fear, as the source suggests, doesn't that imply a direct, maybe even a physiological response that's separate from the patient's later interpretation of that feeling within their larger story? It feels like there's an immediacy there. But okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about empowerment. The very act, the hands-on process of directly controlling these visual elements, even just with a phone, provides this profound sense of agency. And that agency itself, I believe, is directly therapeutic. The source mentions on page 6 the choice of camera angle, composition, lighting, sound as things that contribute to getting the full message across. This active decision-making about how to visually present one's narrative using tools that are right there in your pocket, it directly helps restore a sense of control.
And that's incredibly important, especially for patients who've maybe lost a sense of agency because of illness or trauma.
Right, that loss of control is key.
Exactly. And participant C on page 17 expressed a really significant shift in self-perception just by learning to edit videos. She said, "I see how I was a year ago and how I am today in the videos, and I see a huge difference." That speaks directly to the empowering impact of shaping her own visual identity through these specific technical controls. It's not just about telling the story, it's about controlling the visual grammar, and that feels therapeutic.
I understand the empowerment angle, I really do. But I'd still argue that the feeling of regaining control, which participants clearly experience, stems mostly from owning and shaping the narrative itself. It's about deciding what content goes in, what stays out, how the story is structured, rather than the specific technical fiddling with angles or lighting presets on a phone. The source, again on page 17, indicates that in editing, patients take ownership of their story by the possibility of choosing the way the story will be presented. That phrasing to me firmly emphasizes narrative agency over technical skill. Remember participant A again, page 16? The process of script writing, filming, and editing brought a lot of self-criticism. I had to tell my story through video.
The focus there is squarely on the entire storytelling process, which naturally includes decisions about content, script, editing choices. The technical details, like a specific lighting choice or camera distance, feel like they're in service to this larger goal of narrative construction and reflection. The real power seems to lie in choosing the story and its meaning, not just mastering the technical angle.
I'm still not entirely convinced the technical parts are merely in service or subservient. Think about the actual technical depth these phones offer, even if they seem simple. Yes, the source mentions minimal technical knowledge is needed, page 18, but that doesn't mean the tools aren't capable. Mobile phones today offer a surprisingly robust range of functions for technical expression. We're not talking Hollywood cinematography, obviously, but things like different video modes, still photo options, various focal lengths, zooming in, zooming out, using wide angle versus portrait modes, even basic control over lighting, just by moving the phone or maybe adding a simple desk lamp.
True, phones are quite capable now.
Exactly. And this technical capacity, which is basically universally accessible now, means more patients can actually engage in quite sophisticated visual articulation of their inner world. So the therapeutic benefit here, I argue, comes from the ability to make these subtle technical choices themselves, like choosing a specific camera angle to convey vulnerability, or using light and shadow deliberately to highlight an emotion. It's not just about using a generic recording device, it's that deliberate visual crafting enabled by the phone's accessible tech that feels inherently therapeutic.
Okay, I see the appeal of that argument, framing the phone as an enabler of nuanced expression. But I'd frame its contribution differently. That minimal technical knowledge requirement, coupled with how common phones are, well, it mainly highlights that their biggest contribution is lowering the barrier to entry. It makes it easier for anyone to engage in any kind of creative self-expression using video. So, the therapeutic value seems rooted in facilitating broad participation in the act of creating and reflecting on one's story, not necessarily in the deep exploration of the device's technical features. The source emphasizes creating an indirect and metaphorical language to process experiences in a safe space. That's page 3. The mobile phone is simply the most convenient, least intimidating tool to achieve this broad engagement with the medium, with the narrative content.
It lets people focus on their story, their emotions, rather than getting stuck on complex technical stuff. The emphasis feels like it's on the story, the metaphor, the safe space, all made possible by the tool's accessibility, not necessarily the precise technical nuance it might offer.
All right, so to summarize my position, I really believe that the conscious, precise application of these photographic elements, specific camera angles, thoughtful lighting, chosen shot distances when people are making video content, even just using their phone, it's much more than just a means to an end. These specific technical choices, they directly engage with and help facilitate deep emotional processing. They can genuinely alter self-perception. And in doing that, they become crucial, direct therapeutic interventions in their own right. They offer a tangible way for individuals to exert control, articulate their inner world visually, and actively shape their own healing journey.
And I'll summarize by maintaining that while, yes, these technical elements are absolutely invaluable, essential, even for creating an effective and compelling narrative in video therapy, their direct therapeutic power is, I think, less significant than their role as enablers. They enable the patient's engagement with the whole process, the storytelling, the creation, the reflection, the profound healing, the self-awareness that emerges from the patient's holistic journey through their narrative, the meaning they construct. These technical elements skillfully support and enhance that journey rather than intrinsically driving the psychological transformation through their direct application alone.
You know, this discussion really does highlight just how nuanced and multi-layered video therapy is. It's this intricate dance between the power of specific visual choices and the depth of creating a personal narrative. Both aspects clearly combine to offer this incredibly rich medium for personal exploration and healing. It certainly makes you think about all the different levels involved.
Absolutely. It's a complex interplay, no doubt about it, and considering these different perspectives, these different points of emphasis, certainly deepens our understanding of how it all works. We definitely encourage our listeners to reflect on how these various elements, the technical and the narrative, might combine to shape understanding and perhaps even facilitate therapeutic breakthroughs, whether in their own experiences or in the material they encounter.